Welcome to the Political Trenches, local government at work. Today we head to the land of one hand defends and the other conquers, the province of Nova Scotia, to speak with Mike Dolter CAO for the town of Truro. But before that, we have to dive into some stories that are making the headlines. Ian, you just got back from Nova Scotia and you're ready to head back virtually today. How was it?
Yeah, I haven't been to Nova Scotia since yesterday. I was in Cape Breton for the last week, best part of the last week, working with some folks in Victoria County. They, of course, just had all their municipal elections late October, so we were doing a council orientation and then a little bit of priority setting. And I actually had never been to Cape Breton before, and I loved it. I wish I'd added some extra days to my trip.
Well, let's see if we can talk about Cape Breton a little bit this during our interview today. But we have some big stories that we want to dive into. And our first story comes from Bailey Morton from Aurelia Matters. Federal Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre says he does not back a move to boost infrastructure funding to municipalities. Poilievre in Aurora in November, while touring the Treasure Mills Bakery on Engelhard Drive, said despite calls from local governments, including the Aurora mayor, he would not back transferring a portion of the GST from new home sales to municipalities. Quote, municipal governments don't ever let them bullshit you, are bursting with cash and they're wasting it all, end quote, the leader of the official opposition said. Quote, that's why we don't have enough infrastructure. Cut the bureaucracy, get the hands out of the people's pockets, the leader of the official opposition continued. Poilievre added that municipal government's revenues have grown through the collection of development cost charges and would require municipal governments to speed up permits if elected. Quote, Trudeau will give more and more to incompetent, greedy, money hungry municipal politicians, he added, and ended by saying, I will cut the bureaucracy and axe the tax. Ian, I know this story was discussed at the most recent FCM advocacy days in Ottawa this week as of recording. Municipalities are looking for a partner, and it sounds like the conservative leader isn't going to be that dance partner municipalities are looking for, is it?
No, it's to me, this is completely tone deaf. It's tone deaf, it's ignorant, and it's wrong. And you talked about FCM. I suspect that that sort of a comment would have alarmed lots of municipalities, lots of elected officials, and lots of associations as well. I mean, to some extent, he's right in that there is only one taxpayer, and if a dollar goes to one order of government, it doesn't go to the other or to other orders of government. But all three orders of government, or four or five, if you want to include First Nations and if you want to include schools in there, do have the ability to raise money. And the comment about being bursting with cash is again wrong and ignorant. And to me, heck, if everybody was bursting with cash, I'd probably not have any work to do because there would be lots of people doing lots of different things all at the same time. But I mean, obviously, that is not the case. But when it comes to those three-word slogans that Mr. Poilievre seems to be very, very fond of, the axe the tax one in particular, his comment around speeding up permits is something, and it is an issue that a lot of councils that I've worked with have actually brought up. And a lot of that is around speeding up development. However, some of the things that he referred to in his comments indicated to me that he was thinking development means a lot of residences. I think everybody across the country knows that residential property taxes don't pay for residential services. So it needs to be carefully thought out in terms of matching residential needs with the commercial and industrial requirements as well. So to me, I used the term tone deaf to start. And maybe I'll just be graceful by saying it was just tone deaf.
One of the things that I'm hearing from municipal leaders when I talk to them over the last few months is the offloading, and that's their word that they're using, of federal and provincial jurisdictional issues onto the municipalities. And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate with you for a second, Ian, because I will defend Polyev by saying, you know what? Yes, the per time for permits does cost does take a long time. It does cost a lot to do that. But, and I'm gonna sing FCM praises here for a second, they're working with an outdated system. Municipalities only collect one tax, and that is the property taxes. And everything else they have to pay by finding other sources of revenue. The province and the federal government don't come to the table, they're not going to potentially grow. And if you want to build more homes, as the leader of the official opposition says, you're going to need the infrastructure. And last time I checked, infrastructure cost an arm and a leg. And even the development permits aren't paying for all of them. So the money has to come from somewhere. With the federal election on the horizon here, is this an opening for municipalities to try to ask Justin Trudeau for anything in this upcoming budget that is expected to table in February or March?
Obviously, it is, right? There, you dance with the one that brung you. So if you're a provincial municipal association, or if you're a federal municipal or affiliate type association, of course you're going to be looking for that. And you're right about their, well, I said one taxpayer. You have said that they really rely on the property tax, and that's true. But another significant portion of money to local governments comes from transfers from other order of government, grant programs, and things like that. So that's certainly of impact too. The statements by Mr. Poilievre, though, really, I mean, they said, I mean, he's really good at saying that what he's against, but he's not very good at pointing out anything he's actually standing for. But in this case, what he seems to be doing is creating an us versus them atmosphere where he is part of the us, which is proclaiming common sense, which in my parlance just means people who agree with him. But he's claiming these sorts of things by creating a them out of the complete other order of government, when in reality, we hear about concepts like Team Canada. And to me, that's really where it ought to go. In this case, however, offloading, downloading, whatever you want to call it, often means that orders of government federally or provincially or territorially have chosen to stop doing something that is within their realm of responsibility. And ultimately, if municipalities want whatever that thing is, you mentioned infrastructure, housing's another one. If the municipalities want that sort of thing, they have to start looking after it by themselves and becoming more self-sufficient. So de facto, they end up with responsibility, even though they have no authority and have no funding sources either. And when it comes to the end of the line, municipal election time, the people who live in the community, if they're not been paying attention, are going to pin that squarely on the municipality for not providing things, in which case people like Mr. Poilievre get off scot-free by saying things that are just designed to divide people. And it just makes me so angry.
Ooh, there's only hope. We're going to turn to our next story here. And pickleball seems to be the craze that everyone has been talking about since COVID-19 has ended. But the craze has led to one mayor resigning from office. Our second story comes from Stephen Braun from CBC News. The longtime mayor of Kensington, Prince Edward Island, is stepping down after a contentious debate over new pickleball courts for the central P.E.I. town. Rowan Casely confirmed to CBC News that he handed in his letter of resignation to CAO Jeff Baker late last week after a regularly monthly council meeting. During that meeting, councillors voted 3-2 in favor of construction of 6 new pickleball courts and a washroom facility with help from the 2023 Canada Games Legacy Fund. Casely, who had been Kensington mayor for about 10 years and actually appeared on cross-border interviews, told CBC that he felt spending upwards to $500,000 on the project is not in the best use of the town's resources at this time, even though the Legacy Fund would have provided more than half of the cash. He pointed out that many of the people who would use the courts would not live in Kensington and would not pay taxes towards their upkeep. Ian, do you think the mayor here's resignation highlights the broader challenges in how small town leaders address disagreements over resource allocation?
What's important in a small town and what's important in a big city and what's important in a large rural municipality are quite different. So in this case, they're trying to look after their own residents. And in this case, I think it was a pretty small hill to die on. I mean, $500,000 is probably quite a lot, however, when it comes to this particular community. I haven't been to PEI for almost a month now, so maybe things have changed. I would say too, however, that I mean, I think the mayor is correct when he talks, when he kind of infers anyway that half of this money, of course, was going to come from a grant, but another half had to be raised either by the municipality or by a fundraising effort of some sort. The dollars that were going to go into this facility from the municipal end could only be spent once. So they were either going to be spent on pickleball courts, or they may have been transferred to the library, or they were going to be spent on beautification programs or something. So the mayor was trying to make the point that there are higher and better uses for this particular dollar. And the CAO actually was going along with this line of thinking as well. Of course, the CAO most likely would not make a recommendation to council one way or another. It's up to council to make the final decision. But it sounded like his report to council was quite cautious in terms of spending. So while it still seems like a small hill to die on, it is something quite significant in the life of this community. All that said, he is a councillor like any other in that town. A council as an entity voted to spend this money. The mayor being part of that then became part of supporting a council decision, and maybe he just got to the point where he didn't feel like he could support the council decision, and so decided to step back rather than go along with it.
Do you think you're going to see this more often heading into the future? Because we're seeing more partisanship and that hill to die on becoming a more reoccurring theme in some resignations or even some just departures from council or people not standing for re-election. Could you see more of these? I don't want to say nickel and dime issues because $500,000 is still a lot of money. I don't care who you are. We would not be doing this show if we had $500,000 in the bank right now, I'm assuming, or if we did, we'd be doing it a lot more and probably doing it a lot more fun and having more people on. But do you think that these small challenges that councils have to overcome could lead to more and more people resigning?
I don't know. It's possible, I suppose. It has always been this way. Small urban municipalities are getting more and more strapped for cash. As particularly as infrastructure renewal starts to take place after we've now paid for the original sewers through the middle of town and now we have to redo them. So yeah, this could continue to happen. I don't think it's like a political persuasion thing. It might be more just out of necessity, and whether elected officials are going to resign over this or whether elected officials are just going to go along with the will of council. I don't know. This has happened in the past. I suspect it'll happen in the future. The reason we're talking about it today is because it seems quite unusual. And my suspicion is it will remain unusual, and I kind of hope it does.
I agree wholeheartedly. And our last story we're going to be talking about, we're heading across the pond to the BBC, where our story comes from Nadine Youssef. A Canadian territory has changed its rules for electing municipal officials, for elected municipal officials, allowing them to take an oath pledging allegiance to the country's constitution instead of the crown when they are sworn in. The change comes after the newly elected council of Dawson City, Yukon, refused to take the King's Oath in solidarity with an Indigenous council member who raised concerns about the Crown's history in Canada. The protests delayed their confirmation and placed the town's government at a standstill. Last week, the territorial government announced that they have adjusted the law to give the option to taking one of the two oaths. Richard Mostyn, Yukon's Minister of Community Services, said that the change, quote, allows elected municipal officials to take the oath of allegiance in a way that aligns with social, broader values and cultural identities, end quote. In Canada, a Commonwealth country and former British colony, most elected officials have taken an oath to which they swear or affirm they will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III and his heirs and successors according to law. So questions swirled about whether Dawson City's new council, which had been elected in late October, would be able to sit if they refused to take the oath. Under Yukon's law, the newly elected officials must take it within 40 days of their election. Ian, how can municipalities across Canada address similar cultural and historical concerns while ensuring smooth governance and inclusivity?
To me, well, I mean, prior to, I guess, what, 1982, whenever the Constitution was patriated, I could have the year wrong. But prior to that, it made a lot of sense as a British colony that we would swear allegiance to the British Crown. And since we remain a constitutional monarchy and the king is still essentially, effectively the head of state for us, the the oath is to the head of state, not specifically to a king or a queen or something, but that's kind of why the way it is. It's a bit archaic, a bit of an artifact now. I think it doesn't really matter nearly as much. The importance of what's going on here is the solemnness of the understanding of the responsibility that collectively the elected officials and wherever they are across this country are taking to look after the people who elected them and the ones who didn't either, for that matter. And it's an oath of service that says, sure, we're running it through the king at the moment, but it's an oath of service to the community at large and a recognition that the work that the individual members of council and that council as a collective is doing is greater than self. All that said, I really have no issue about the changes to the oath. I think it's a bit of a tempest in a teapot. We allow sworn testimony to be done on religious books other than Bibles, even now. So to me, if you want to swear an oath to something other than the monarchy, I can see that happening more and more, and I really have no issue with it at all.
And I should note that this story is coming from Canada, but we're seeing similar debates around this issue play out around all Commonwealth countries. Just recently in New Zealand, their elected MPs had to swear an oath, and even in Australia, and there was concern, and they raised issues around swearing that oath to the King and of King Charles III. So it's not just a Canadian issue; it's a issue and a debate that's playing out sort of worldwide and in the Commonwealth countries. So it's going to be a story I'm going to be watching. But we're right back with Mike Dolter CAO from the town of Truro. Welcome to the Political Trenches, Local Government at Work. With a distinguished 21-year career in the Canadian Forces, Mike began his professional journey as an Army Logistic Finance Officer. His military tenure took him across Canada and internationally on peacekeeping missions, honing his skills in leadership, logistics, and financial management. According to his biography, one of the most pivotal roles was the comptroller at the CFB Kingston in Ontario, where he managed the financial operations of a community of over 5,000 residents. His experience sparked a deep interest in municipal management, ultimately leading him to transition to civilian public service. And in 2005, he retired from the military to become the CAO of his hometown in Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador. After 9 years, he moved to Truro, Nova Scotia, to serve as the town's CAO, where he continues to focus on enhancing financial performance for resilient communities. Mike, welcome to the Political Trenches.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So I'm going to kick off the line of questions, and it's a simple one that we've asked every single person who's come on the show. How would you describe the state of municipalities in the province of Nova Scotia today?
Well, I think in general terms, we're in pretty good shape. Obviously, we're like anybody, any municipality across Canada, we're facing challenges with everything from climate change to inflation to just I guess general civility within that we all face every day with the dealing with the general public. I think for the most part, we've got a fairly robust both a associated municipal administration within Nova Scotia, as well as at the political level, the Nova Scotia Federation of Canadian Municipalities. They're both fairly strong organizations, and I think they've done really a great job in kind of tying the municipalities together. So we share a lot of knowledge. We have a lot of meetings, several meetings a year, regular, and then we have a lot of special meetings that are called by either organizations. And we do a lot of collaborative work together, which I think really works well. It's pretty much on a regular basis that I'm consulting with one of my peers from across Nova Scotia on an issue or being asked something. We do a lot of stuff. We've got a listserv set up for all the communities, and we fire questions around all the time, kind of share information so that nobody's reinventing the wheel. And and I know that our councils do similar things. They're always talking to each other, so we're in good shape. We just went through municipal elections, so new councils in place in a lot of locations. I lucked out. I've got one new councillor. I guess I lucked out if I've got a good council to start with, but it was good, and so we've got one new member. So we're kind of everybody's settling out from that, going into the new year, and then because it wasn't complicated enough, now we got not a new provincial government, but provincial government got reelected, and that's one of the areas I think for Nova Scotia that we'll work on the next the next 4 years with the continuation of the Houston government is just a relationship with the municipalities, because coming out of Newfoundland, I think Newfoundland had probably a little bit stronger relationship with municipal affairs than we do here. And municipal affairs had a lot more clout in Newfoundland. I mean, I used to get all my capital money from municipal affairs. Here it comes through another department, and it's kind of it flows separately. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, a little bit more in Nova Scotia. It would be good. I don't know if that'll ever get streamlined. I don't think we're not going to change that quickly, but it's that's some of the things that need to evolve, and we're talking to the province.
So been around a bit. My question to you is, based on your experience in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Labrador, and some of the other work you've done elsewhere in the country, what do you think is unique about local government in Nova Scotia?
I think it's somewhat unique in the fact that we've got Newfoundland, for example, has 100 or 280 some municipalities, right? And and that's okay. In Nova Scotia, we've got 48, 49 municipalities, and they say, well, that's way too many, right? It's unique, but I think at the same time, with what I see as not a lot of municipalities, I think it's a real chance to talk a lot, right, and to exchange information. And it's not an overwhelming number, so you usually know where to turn to find someone who can help you out with an issue you might have. So there ends up being a lot of collegial work being done among the CAOs and that, and having a good conversation. Newfoundland, we were just too spread out. I mean, you knew, and a lot of really small communities that, I was in Cornerbrook at 20,000 people, which was a city, and then I guess the next largest after me was Mount Pearl on the other coast, which in Newfoundland that's like a 9-hour drive, right? So it was a lot of distance to cover. So there wasn't a lot of chance on you're once or twice on an annual conference you might see people, but in Nova Scotia we get a chance to get together quite often. Usually, and the good thing is we just don't do it in Halifax. We do it all around the province, and we really get a chance to kind of share in what each others are doing and kind of learn from that. For example, we're doing an energy project right now with the County of Cumberland, and we're kind of learning off what Mahone Bay and some of the other areas have been doing in Nova Scotia, and kind of sharing with that. And people are really open to sharing information and best practices and what they've been up to. And I think that's worked well. I mean, you look at, my experience in Ontario was there's just so many municipal governments, and they've got, multi-tiered government as well too. We run a county system here, but it's not really a county system at the end of the day. I mean, the towns exist on their own, and the cities exist on their own, and then the counties are their own municipal units at the end of the day, right? So it's kind of it's a little bit different, I think, in that respect too. Whereas, you see the multi-tiered government, and I think Alberta has a similar model as well too. I think that's actually something Nova Scotia could benefit from, is establishing true county regional services in government for some services, which I think probably Nova Scotia needs to get itself to at some point. But I think where we are different is, again, I think we're a lot more cohesive for the most part, and interesting too. The city of Halifax has no issue in basically falling on its sword for the rest of the province. They've turned down money from the province, that no, give it to the other communities. We're good, which I find pretty unique. That even though it a city of 500,000, which is large for Atlantic Canada, but it really sees its role as kind of a leader within the smaller entities or smaller municipalities, and that's really refreshing in the fact that it's not out for itself. It knows if it does well, everybody else does well, but it does well by having everybody else in a good position as well too. It doesn't want to be the island of prosperity in Nova Scotia. It realizes it's got to spread that wealth and some of those things around. So it fends for itself, and it lets the province kind of do what it needs to do outside of Halifax. I'm not saying that it doesn't get some provincial money, but certainly it shares that around. In fact, I got a project I just finished this summer that the only reason I got it done is Halifax turned the money down because they didn't feel they needed it, and we got it instead. So my hat's off to them. It was on my bucket list of things to do, and I finally got done this summer.
I'd be interested in getting your take on the tone that may have come out of the municipal election. Were there any major changes or significant observations that maybe you generated, either just in Truro or more broadly than that, coming out of the election?
The tone itself. I mean, I think the municipal election itself, I think there were, I mean, we've been doing fairly well. There wasn't any big major issues. One of the concerns that always continues to come out, which is challenging too, because it's not our responsibility in Nova Scotia, is housing and housing affordability. A lot of the council, even our current council, they want to do something about it, right? And I'm without, we're staff are constantly trying to go, okay, like we've got to be careful on what we do here. We have a role to play, but it's not funding, it's not building, it's facilitating and working with the people that do this for a living, right? And we're constantly trying to, I say stay within our lane and make sure that we're working in the areas where our expertise is, and I'm constantly trying to avoid having my staff dragged into areas that it's just not their area of expertise. It's provincial responsibility, and we all know if you want to take something from the province, they will hand it to you gladly and go, it's yours. So with on the political side, they very much want to help, and we can completely understand that. We've got a fairly large homelessness problem in Truro, which is amazing for a city of 14,000 people. But that's not something council can fix tomorrow. And Mayor and I have had extensive conversations on that, and she gets it. But I mean, it's really hard to stay in that lane sometimes when you got people saying, look, you guys got to do something, right? And I think people really turn to municipal government a lot of times to do that type of thing because we're pretty nimble, right? We can do things fairly quickly, and they see that. I mean, the federal government takes years to do stuff, or decades to do stuff. Province takes years to do stuff, and we take, probably maybe years, but mostly months or weeks to do things, right? So, I think a lot of people are looking to us for quick fixes on certain issues. But I mean, the tone of our election was fairly positive. I don't think, but the big thing is affordability and bringing people, people being able to live and stay in the community. And we've got a lot of people that, we've got a lot of really good jobs in town, but we do have a lot of manufacturing jobs where people are making less money and trying to make the community welcoming and having opportunities for that type. So my phone will ring for a second here now. It'll stop. Sorry about that. I should have, my assistant will get, there we go. Here we go. My assistant will get that. Yeah, so you can edit that out. Anyways, so yeah, we've just like I said, that issue has been the major thing that has been going on, and some of it's interesting too. I think one of the things that we just approved provincially imposed code of conduct, and some of the councillors during the election campaign talked about civility as well too, right? And we all know that with social media and everything else, I mean, there's, either civility between residents, taxpayers, and the council, and then sometimes the council within themselves.
The role and responsibilities of municipalities, we talked about it earlier about how the province and the federal government are so happy to just allow municipalities to take the responsibility of some provincial and federal issues. Looking towards the future, do you see municipal governance changing dramatically because of that offloading of jurisdictional responsibility?
Yes, I do see it coming. But you talk about the things that keep you up at night. It does concern me a lot because again, we run a fairly small staff and we're fairly specialized in what we do. You start putting on, and we're busy, right? So you start putting on more of a load, particularly in areas that we don't have the level of expertise. And the province has the advantage of having departments that do this kind of thing, and then you put it down at our level. It puts a huge load on the staff, and again, it gets into new areas where we don't have the lived experience of what the province was doing with some of these files. And there's a lot of areas that, I mean, we just, quite frankly, I don't even think can cover off. We've got a policing review going on right now, and I'm very much concerned about some of the shifting that could occur on what are now central services that are provided, for example, by the RCMP, that are now going to come down on municipal departments. And both from a responsibility perspective, sourcing of the level of expertise, and then the funding, right? That was resonant with the province. And typically, when you see stuff come down for the province, it doesn't necessarily come with the money that they had to do that function. So again, we've got municipal, we've got property tax picking up costs that we've never picked up before. And again, I talked, I think earlier, the challenges is that we've got, we're dealing with a fairly fixed tax base and increasing costs and responsibilities.
I want to thank you so much from both Ian and myself for sitting down with us today. We always find these conversations fascinating when we sit down with people, because we hear their passion in their voices, and it sounds from just our 40-minute conversation that you have passion for your community and passion to serve your country and your community. So thank you so much for joining us in the political trenches today.
No, thanks a lot. I enjoyed it, though. It's good discussion. Ian, thanks for inviting me to do it. I certainly appreciate it. And Chris, it's great. So yeah, hope you guys have a great Christmas and enjoy the weekend.
Thanks very much, Mike.
Ian, another great interview with Mike, and another great episode talking about some three pretty political stories across Canada. How'd you think the last episode before our year in review was?
Yeah, you're right. You made a comment a little earlier too about the political nature. Well, we get into politics as far as local governments go, but we rarely conflate federal and provincial. So we actually did that this time. And as for Mike, I've met Mike a few times over the years, and I've really enjoyed him. So it was a kind of a no-brainer for us to go to him as we were looking for some insight from Nova Scotia. So I really enjoyed it.
I did too. We will be back in 2 weeks' time for our last episode of 2024, where we're looking back on the entire year that was 2024. As we did last year, we want to hear from you directly. So on the Cross Border Interviews website, which the links will be in the show notes, and I'll send the link to Ian so they can put it on the Strategic Steps website as well. Send us your stories. We want to hear directly from you. What stories have you been reading over the last 12 months? And what stories have you been following over the last 12 months? I want to hear it, and we're going to discuss our top 3 stories of 2024. Ian, always a pleasure to be in the trenches with you, and we're back in 2 weeks.
See you in a bit. Thanks, Chris.